LibriVox.com.
Relationships, sex, passion with Dr. Laurie Betito. Hear the show live weeknights 10 to 11 on CJAD 800.
Welcome to Passion, a show about love, sex, and relationships. And tonight, we explore the different ways people express their passion for sex. Alternative sexuality is a regular feature on Passion. And tonight, my co-host for this segment is Frank Kermit, a guy you all know because he does our Dating Dilemma segment. He has written extensively and lectured extensively about all kinds of alternative sexuality. In fact, tonight, we're giving away his CD, Alternative Relationships Choices, the Guide to Non-Monogamy. So anybody who calls in will go into a draw and your chance to win this CD as well as to a certificate. We do have some prizes to give away. We are discussing the issue tonight of playing it safe in BDSM, bondage, discipline, sadomasochism. Basically a BDSM for beginners, people who have may think they may want to dabble in it a little bit, learn more about it. Maybe I guess we're here to demystify the whole thing and how this can be done very, very safely. And now, with the popularity of 50 Shades of Grey, which is that erotic novel that has been on the New York Times bestseller list, that has been talked about on pretty much every major network on television. Well, that is a story. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but that is a story about BDSM. And interestingly enough, done very safely in the story. Contracts are signed and rules established, and it really gives you a window into that lifestyle. But at the same time, it's quite an erotically charged novel. So with that, I figured what a good time to be discussing this, since a lot of people are reading that book. A lot of people, all ages, like from 18 all the way. I spoke to a woman in her late 70s reading the book and finding it hot as well. So there you have it. So we also have another special guest because, on Alternative Sex, we usually have a panel. And tonight, Annabelle Joseph is our guest on the phone as well. She's a novelist, another novelist who specializes in the romance of dominance and submission. Her stories celebrate the complexity of sensual power exchange in loving and sometimes complicated relationships. So we'll talk about when it gets complicated and how not to make it so complicated. Annabelle, welcome to the show.
Ooh. Hi, Dr. Laurie.
Hi,
Frank. Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure, although I don't think we have a very good connection. We may have to change that in the next few minutes. But talk to us about you and what makes you, let's say, an expert in this field.
Well, I have several books out there. I have actually 12 books out there with 2 more coming out this month. People say about my books that they're very emotional, and I try to portray BDSM kind of as a natural part of people's lives, not just something they do in a dark, scary dungeon, although I do write some scenes too. And I personally have been doing power exchange for a very long time, and by a long time I mean like pre-internet, like
okay,
20 years ago. I remember when BDSM Safety, we were renting P.O. boxes so we could answer, personal ads in the back of Stand Corrected magazine. And so that's how long I've been at it. And the times have changed because safety doesn't just mean P.O. boxes anymore, but it's still a big concern for people in the lifestyle. And one of the things I try to express in my books is that BDSM is a very powerful way that people can connect, and I think that's why so many people are drawn to it, especially with this new 50 Shades thing and everything.
Right.
But that power and intensity comes with a lot of risks that aren't there in what we would call vanilla relationships.
Right.
So I think this is a great topic to address at this time, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, I like the idea of calling it, maybe it will change at some point instead of BDSM power exchange, because that really is what it is sometimes. You can exchange it for something that either that you take turns, or you're exchanging what you would do in normal. Let's say you're a high-powered somebody out in the regular world, but in the bedroom you might exchange that for being more submissive.
Right. And I think that term kind of draws in the fact that it doesn't just go one way. It's always, in the best scenes, it's an exchange. I mean, somebody gives, somebody takes. It's like, it's a dance when it's done right. So.
Right. 514-790-0991. Star Talk, star 8255 on your Bell Mobility cell phone. Or you can text us if you have a question about alternative sexuality at 514-800. Now, we got a text message. I'm not sure this is part of Power Exchange or BDSM, or could be. You'll tell us. But the question is, I love golden showers. Is that normal? So the whole thing about urinating on somebody and finding that arousing, would that be a form of kind of debasing somebody, or I don't know, dirtying them, let's say? Would that be what would be arousing in that situation? I don't know, Frank, if you have any thoughts. Go ahead. You can go Annabelle, yeah.
I think that kind of falls under kind of edgier play, but yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are masochists, and they get off on kind of being humiliated or degraded. Or there are some people who, like a top, might want to see, well, how far will this person submit? And so that's a pretty deep submission. Okay. So that's my take on that.
Okay, Frank?
There could also be a very taboo element about it. Growing up, they may have been taught that touching pee-pee might be a very bad thing, and it could have been during a time when they were going through a certain type of development.
Right.
So the idea that they're playing with something that is not something
that's naughty, right?
That's naughty could add to and heighten the experience
right.
for some people.
And I think the question, is it normal? You see, on this show, we don't talk normal. It's alternative. It's different. It's not vanilla. It's not the usual. But whatever two people do that is consensual falls within normal. In my books, and I'm sure the both of you will agree. We're going to take a short break and come back. Frank Kermit is here. Annabelle Joseph is here. It is Alternative Sexuality tonight, and BDSM 101, or Sensual Power Exchange 101 here on Passion. You're listening to Passion right here on CJAD 800.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank here has got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's, 'cause he knows what you are going through, 'cause Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com, to franktalks.com.
This is Alternative Sexuality tonight, and my co-host tonight is Frank Kermit. You know him. He's a dating coach, an author, and has written and has also lectured extensively about all kinds of alternative sexuality. We also have Annabelle Joseph, who is a novelist specializing in stories of sensual power exchange. Let's go to our phone lines. Hi, Janice. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. I had an experience a couple of years ago with, what can I say, a very high-powered man. Mm-hmm. He had bodyguards and la. And it was after the Grand Prix, and he invited me back to his condo. And, he wanted to urinate on me. and it's the first time it ever happened to me.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, whatever. Like I wasn't disgusted or anything at all. I wasn't particularly turned on. And then when it came down to sex, he couldn't have, so he had to ejaculate on my breasts. And then he threw me in the shower. No, he didn't throw me in the shower. He was very polite and kind. He said, honey, get yourself cleaned up. I'll get the limo to take you home.
And that was it.
That was it. Was that a debasing experience for me? I don't find it was.
But it's interesting that he wasn't able to function any other way.
No.
Yeah, maybe Frank has some insight on this guy.
I've often found that for men who are in very powerful positions,
very powerful,
they tend to get very bored with what would be considered normal or novelty, vanilla sex, because they get it so much in abundance. Women are throwing themselves at them.
Yeah,
So
but he picked me. I didn't pick him.
Well, he probably picked you because he felt a vibe about you that you might be open to trying something.
Yeah, for sure he did. And that's yes, I got that.
Did he ask you before, or did he just do it? Did he just urinate on you, or did he ask you?
I don't know. We had dinner together at a very, very expensive restaurant where nobody can get in unless you're somebody special.
But sexually, did he ask you when you were in the bedroom, or did he just do it?
He asked.
He asked. Okay, so it's just the whole question of consent is important. So
Yeah,
to me,
I
if there's
was fine
consent,
with
it's
it.
okay.
I mean,
well then,
I thought, okay, I've never done this before, but
you were
what's the
open,
harm?
right? Okay, thanks so much for calling in, Janice.
But is that called abusive behavior to a woman?
No, I don't think that's necessarily abusive behavior
think so
to a woman.
either.
You didn't feel abused, and he wasn't doing it to abuse you, but it was arousing to him. Sometimes it's just hard to understand why certain things arouse certain people that don't arouse your average person.
The
Well,
presence,
I didn't quite get it, but I was fine with it.
the presence of consent devoids any concept of abuse.
That's right.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Janice.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
I don't know, Annabelle, if you want to add anything to that.
Oh, I agree. It's, consent is the key, and will communicate, and this is what they want, and they're both enjoying it, then it's 100% wonderful, in my opinion.
Right. All right, let's go to Joe from Boston. Hi, Joe.
Hey, how are you tonight? Big Annabelle Joseph fan. I actually live in the Atlanta area.
Thank you.
Boston tonight.
Awesome.
But I was wanting to respond to the fellow that was asking about the golden showers being normal.
Uh-huh.
And it really depends on your definition of the word normal.
That's right.
If if your definition of the word, or if you would call it deviant or different, anything that doesn't involve the simple mechanics of reproduction, then just about everybody is into something that's not normal.
Yeah, that's quite true. And it's true, that question, it's a funny one, is it normal? Who decides normal,
Yeah.
The norm is different than normal. It actually doesn't imply normal or abnormal. The norm is what most people engage in. Most people don't engage in golden showers, but that doesn't make people who do abnormal. So it is interesting the way that people perceive the whole idea of normal or abnormal. Joe, thanks so much for calling in.
You're quite welcome.
All right. Bye-bye now. We'll take a short break and come back with Annabelle Joseph and Frank Kermit for Alternative Sexuality here on Passion.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching is available in person, by phone, and by Skype for singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles. www.franktalks.com.
franktalks.com. 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 franktalks.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
Alternative sex tonight on Passion. Frank Kermit is here, and my guest, another guest, Annabelle Joseph, who writes sensual power exchange stories, novels, and she herself practices or is in the lifestyle, which she'll tell us more. We got a text message at 514-800. I'm not sure if it's real or not, but let's assume. The question is, my brother enjoys watching me masturbate. Is that BDSM? My quick answer to that is, if we're talking normal, that falls out of normal, and that's taboo. There's still that one big taboo, which is the incest taboo, and this to me falls into inappropriate behavior, and I'd want to know a little bit more about what's going on there. I don't know how you feel about that, Annabelle, but that's my instant reaction to that.
Yeah, I mean, if this is his fantasy and that's what he's writing about, that's one thing. But if this is really going on, then there's a lot of questions about, right, what age is the brother and those kind of uncomfortable things. So
that's right. And how long has this been going on? And what's the power? Sometimes the power exchange it's not, although it sounds like it's consensual, it's because of the excuse me, maybe the power indifference inherent in that relationship, just like you would for sexual harassment with a boss and an underling, for example. To me, it's the same thing.
Well, part of being able to offer consent is that you have to understand the consequences of the actions you're about to take. This is why people who are intoxicated are not allowed to be able to give their consent. So if you have sex with somebody who's drunk, they can say they never really consented to it because they're not in a sober frame of mind to appreciate the consequences of the potential action.
Yeah.
So in a case like this where we're dealing with incest, you're dealing possibly with people who are underage who may not fully appreciate the consequences of those actions, and that could be very emotionally damaging, which is why we don't allow it.
That's right, which is something that may have started when they were unable to consent, even if they carried it forward and it appears consensual now in adulthood, but it's based on something unhealthy to begin with, and I think that's real important. We'll continue our discussion on sensual power exchanges, or BDSM 101. If you've got questions, we've got the answers for you tonight on alternative sex, right here on Passion on CJAD 800.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching available in person, by phone, and by Skype. For singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles, franktalks.com.
franktalks.com. You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
Alternative Sexuality. Once a month, we focus on, or we explore, the different ways people express their passion for sex outside of what we would normally call vanilla sex, regular stuff. And tonight we are discussing the issue of basically playing it safe in BDSM exchanges or sensual power exchanges. And if you really want to read about it, you can read Annabelle's books. She's got 12 books with 2 more coming out. Annabelle, what is your website that people can go to find out about the books?
They can go to AnnabelleJoseph.com, and Annabelle is spelled Annabel. There's no L-E on the end. So, all my books are there and all the information. So
right. Or people can also pick up, the 50 Shades of Grey. They'll get a very good picture of what S&M or a power exchange. I'm not sure there was too much of an exchange. I think it was dominance more than anything. But it's an eye-opener for people who don't know anything about this. So we're trying to open eyes tonight and demystify a little bit of what BDSM is.
Annabelle, one of the questions I have for you is what is going on in the mindset of a submissive? because I think that a lot of people feel that anyone who chooses to be a submissive in the BDSM lifestyle, that there's got to be something wrong with them. And how do you answer that thought?
And maybe before that is, what is a submissive for people who have never heard that term before? Maybe, Annabelle, you can describe what that is.
Oh, sure. It's kind of a complicated question because submission kind of means something different to everybody. But I can definitely say, as far as, there's a top and there's a bottom. The top is doing something, and the submissive is receiving, whatever the top is doing. So the submissive is more the one who takes it. So, and I do, like Frank was saying, I really advocate in my books and just in my life and in the community, I advocate for, that submission doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you or you were abused as a child and so now you have to be abused to feel happy, because what's going on when you submit is an abuse. It's something that the submissive chooses. And this is, as much as anybody chooses a partner that turns them on, a submissive chooses a dominant partner because it turns them on. So I think it's really important to remember that, submission doesn't equal doormat. And if you're a masochist and you like pain and you like suffering, that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It's just to get you out. It's like the golden showers. It's just
something
that works for you.
Right, something that's arousing for you.
But it's got to be very risky. I mean, how do you choose the person who's going to be your top? How do you figure out whether or not that person is a safe person to play with?
Well, I think it takes a lot of discipline. I mean, you can't just go waltzing into your local dungeon or play party and see a hot guy and say, okay, yeah, I'll go home with you. I mean, in the vanilla world, maybe it's okay to do that, maybe not. But in the BDSM world, you really wouldn't want to do that, because you really have to trust somebody, and there has to be negotiation and communication before you would ever start exchanging power, because it's risky. It can be risky.
What are the risks, Annabelle? What are we talking about when we say it's risky?
Well, I mean, especially if you're... the way I feel about it is the deeper you get into the lifestyle and the harder you play, the riskier it gets. If you're just kind of dabbling in it and you're experimenting, there's not a whole lot of risk, because you're probably not doing anything that's that hardcore.
Okay.
But when you're going to play with somebody who's been in the lifestyle for a while and they want to do riskier things, you have to really be sure they know.
And I know there are all kinds of workshops, that to show you how to do, roping workshops and this workshop and that workshop. Maybe you can tell our listeners who may have no clue as to any of these practices, what are some of the riskier things that, kind of that would have a warning, don't try this at home unless well-trained,
Well, it's funny because when I started, I didn't even know these things were out there. But as I got deeper into the lifestyle, I realized that people would play with things like electricity, or with breath play, like, choking somebody out, or playing with needles, or, doing pretend rape scenes or pretend kidnapping scenes. And, it's definitely... the stuff is out there, but you don't have to jump right into that, of course. But if you progress to the point where you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're doing it with people who are educated and who are experienced.
Right. I remember when we had the Everything to Do with Sex show in Montreal, and they had a dungeon set up in the back, and there were some things there that, well, besides the flogging and things like that, there was one thing where somebody lay down in between two sheets of, I guess it was latex or something. They kind of sucked the air out, and then you were immobilized between, in this latex thing. I imagine you better know what you're doing when that's happening too, because you can't move, so you're at the mercy of somebody. So it can be quite scary if that trust element isn't there, which is why, like you say, you don't just go into a bar and say, hey, let's go and play some BDSM together without knowing anything about them or knowing anything about their rules.
But then how do you meet people in that lifestyle?
That's a good point, too. Where do you find them?
Well, there's a lot of, now with the internet, it's so much easier, because you can go, there are a lot of big BDSM sites where you can network with people and you can find out what's going on in your area. Like when I was doing it back, 20 years ago, nobody knew what anybody was doing. It was all big, under the carpet type of thing.
Right.
But now you can go to a play party, you can meet people face to face, and you can become good friends before you ever, do anything. And so that's nice, and you can talk to people who've played with other people, and they can say, oh, yeah, he's safe, I played with him, he's responsible, or she's a good mistress or whatever, and then it's a lot easier now than it used to be.
It's funny to hear the word play, in all of this. It sounds like, play dates for adults, basically.
Yeah.
It takes it away from the sex part, though. Like, where does the play part, where does the sex fit into all of this? Is it, does it always involve sexuality, or can it sometimes not involve sexuality?
Well, that was the other funny thing I discovered, because for me, it always has been a sexual thing. Like, to me, they always went together. But I found out, as I got more involved in the community, that there are people who do it for adrenaline purposes, or they do it for comfort purposes, or, they get something else out of it besides sex. So, yeah, that's another thing that you have to negotiate before you play with somebody is, is this going to be a sexual scene, or is this just going to be strictly play?
Right. And Frank, where do people go in Montreal, like, to meet people? Where would you direct them?
Well, there were some brunches that were held pretty regularly by some of the organizations here in Montreal. So you would type in BDSM Brunch Montreal and see who's setting up the next brunch. You would go to a brunch, meet people there. It's a very public event in the sense that it's usually held at a public place and not somebody's private home. There are fetish events that happen around town.
Yeah.
And if you go to different websites relative to BDSM here in Montreal, everybody lists everybody else's site, even if they're all competitors, because it's such a small community.
Okay.
So these are places that you can start. I'd also like to mention that some people define their sexual orientation as BDSM.
Really?
Yes, because they don't actually have sexual intercourse. They will play using BDSM practices as the sex.
So without having any...
Without what vanilla people would consider sexual intercourse, they may partner up with people and they may use flogging and paddling and different BDSM practices, and that for them is the sex.
So it doesn't matter what the orientation of the play partners are? They could be any play partner?
Well, it could be somebody who, let's say, is straight and they want to be with someone of the opposite gender. But rather than have physical sex, where they're penetrating and ejaculating and having an orgasm, they'll achieve a sexual high from different forms of BDSM play.
Right. Without having sex there. I do have a text message here, Frank. Maybe you can answer this one. Why do I get so turned on by paying for sex with non-working girls? In other words, women who are not prostitutes.
Well, the bottom answer that I would give is because it addresses your emotional needs. Now, if we delve into that, it could be a matter that paying for the sex makes you feel more in control of the situation. The illusion of control could be an aphrodisiac for some people. In some cases, you might want to live out the fantasy of paying for sex, but you actually want to just pay a girl who actually wants to be there, meaning she's not a working girl who's only there for the money. She likes you, you're paying her to be there, but she would probably be willing to be there anyway, which is the added element of loving comfort.
So it's a little bit of a fetish thing there, maybe something that's aroused, something that's being played out, a fantasy that may be being played out.
Without actually having met the person who wrote this.
Obviously, we're generalizing here.
But, yeah. And I would say, okay, it's a sense of control. He feels he has more control over the situation, and it could also be living out a taboo fantasy of paying for it, but without actually being with somebody who doesn't want to be with him.
Yeah, that sounds logical to me. Tonight, alternative sexuality. In studio with me is Frank Kermit, who has written and lectured extensively about all kinds of alternative sexuality. So he's my co-host for the evening, as well as our special guest tonight, Annabelle Joseph. You can check out her website at Annabelle, Annabel, Joseph.com, and find out all about her books that talk about or that describe lots of sensual power exchanges if you want to find out more. We'll continue this discussion coming up here on Passion on CJAD 800.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit,
the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching is available in person, by phone, and by Skype for singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles. franktalks.com.
franktalks.com.
We're talking about alternative sexuality tonight. Well, it's our regular feature here. Once a month, we focus on different ways that people express their passion for sex. And tonight, my panel is Frank Kermit, that you all know from our Dating Dilemma segment. He has also written and lectured quite a bit on this subject, so he knows a lot. And we also have Annabelle Joseph, who also knows an awful lot and is certainly considered an expert in this field in the BDSM community. And she's also a novelist, so you can check her out at AnnabelleJoseph.com. So we talked about meeting people. I've heard you say the word dungeon, so we talk about play and meeting people, but what are these dungeons? Well, how do you describe them? Where do you find them? Because that's something that's, a little out of the realm of the ordinary that people would have any knowledge about.
Right. Well, not every community has a dungeon. I live in the Atlanta area, and we have a very active dungeon, in addition to just some smaller BDSM clubs. Some places they don't have dungeons. Some places they get together, they call it a play space, and it might be somebody's, like there's a party around here where people meet in somebody's kind of big barn, and it's really anywhere where the atmosphere and the equipment is there, and where people are kind of following the kind of dungeon etiquette, where you're, people do their scenes, and people, you can watch, but you don't ever intrude in a scene that you don't belong in, and and people follow rules about equipment safety and things, and so it's a community thing.
It's amazing how there's so much terminology, safe words and scene and play. And I'm imagining for somebody very new to the field, you'd have to do some research before you would even go to a place like this.
Yeah, and I could say that, people can have a dungeon in their house. It doesn't have to be a public dungeon.
Sure.
People can set up a dungeon in their house and just have the few things that they like to play with. So, that's a personal thing, too.
In the book, in 50 Shades of Grey, the guy is a very wealthy guy who has a dungeon in his house, and wow, the description of that dungeon, quite elaborate.
We all want a big dungeon in our house.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, for people in the lifestyle, think of it this way. Most people in their homes have an entertainment room, someplace that when guests come over, they go in, they sit down, they chit-chat.
Right, like a den or a billiards room.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, when you're in the lifestyle, that is not only your sexuality, but it's also your form of entertainment. So some people can convert their entire basements into a personal dungeon reserved for very special friends.
That's one way of putting it. So what would we find in a dungeon?
Oh boy, that depends on how rich or it is. There's some equipment that's pretty. They have St. Andrew crosses, which is kind of like a cross thing that you can cuff people to. A lot of dungeons will have a big wall that has implements hanging on it, like whips or floggers or paddles or whatever. Cages are big in dungeons.
Okay.
Cages are really fun.
How are they fun? Explain to me, Annabelle, how cage is fun.
Oh, submissives really love cages. Cages come in with aftercare too, and I know we were going to talk about aftercare because a lot of submissives don't just like when it's going on; they like what comes afterwards when they're soothed and comforted. And so, being put into a cage gives submissives a lot of times a feeling of security and value, that you're kept in this little cage because you're a valuable thing. And, cages mean something different to everybody, but
right.
Yeah, you'll find cages and,
here's
sometimes medical tables. It's
that
endless.
sounds scary. Medical tables. Ooh, getting probed. Let's say somebody decides they're going to try something and they suddenly feel confined, have a panic attack. I don't know. Something goes wrong within them. Like, how do you know when it's, when somebody's really
gone too far
or suffering or what have you, or it's part of the game or the play? Like, how do you determine all of that?
Well, they say with safe words, I mean, obviously you would always set up a safe word in advance. And they always say that no or stop are not good safe words.
Why?
Because a lot of times when people get into it, they love to scream no and they love to scream please and stop. So really the best safe words are things that are really don't fit. Things like, Barney or rainbow or something that is going to make whoever's the top stop and say, okay, that person just said the safe word.
Okay.
And really, and the top has to watch too, because sometimes people don't safe word out of either they're in subspace or they feel like, they want to tough it out. So I think a good top will stop throughout a scene and ask too, like, how are we doing? Is everything all right? Especially if he's playing with somebody newer, you might want to ask your top to do that for you.
What about in situations like, I'm thinking the more dangerous stuff, like erotic asphyxiation? Like, to me, that's really scary. I mean, I know, autoerotic asphyxiation, you're by yourself, you do this, there have been deaths, it can be quite dangerous. But what about, is this ever part of power exchanges or BDSM play?
I know a couple of people who are really into breath play. And the thing that really distinguishes them from people who aren't into it is that they're just really, really attentive. Because obviously you don't want to kill somebody. So
Jeez, no.
they really know what they're doing. But you don't want to do that just casually. You have to really know what you're doing.
You have to really
that is part of
trust.
BDSM.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also a danger that we haven't really touched on, and that is when you go to a dungeon or a play party, not everybody there is going to follow the etiquette and the rules. There may be a rule that says no picture taking, but you have somebody who tries to sneak in with a camera to take pictures.
Or their phone.
Or their phone and not get people's consents. Sometimes you have people who, there's a scene going on, and they want to enter the scene without speaking or to someone or asking permission. And how do we combat that?
Well, a lot of times the community combats it. I mean, the parties that I go to, if somebody does something like that, they are reprimanded pretty clearly and taught not to do it again. And if they do it again, then they're thrown out and they're not welcome back. So, I mean, the community will police its own. But there's a big uproar in Philadelphia right now about consent violations. And so communities deal with this, but that you have to deal with it. You have to communicate and call people out when they are not following the rules.
Right. We're talking with Annabelle Joseph and Frank Kermit. We got a text message. Somebody clearly seems a little offended by our discussion tonight. How kinky can you get? When will you interview Bernardo and even Carla Homolka? Which I find insulting, frankly. When you realize how common this actually is, I think people don't realize that this kind of kink is more common than any other kind of kink. So anyhow, we'll come back, take a short break and come back with some final words from our guests here on Passion.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching is available in person, by phone, and by Skype for singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles. www.franktalks.com.
franktalks.com. You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
We are coming to the end of our show, Alternative Sexuality. Once a month, we discuss alternative sex. Yes, maybe you can call it kinky, whatever it is, or kink. My guest tonight, a couple of guests here, but Annabelle Joseph is a novelist who specializes in the romance of dominance and submission. You can go to annabellejoseph.com to find out more. Annabelle, any final thoughts or resources you want to direct our listeners to?
I will just put in a plug for, BDSM erotica, because a lot of people are really getting into it now that 50 Shades of Grey is out there. And I mean, if you really are interested in getting into the lifestyle or just learning more, BDSM erotica can kind of not only turn you on, but it can teach you a lot, and about what's okay, what's not okay, how things go in relationships and things like that. Because there's so many different forms of BDSM out there. So if it interests you, check it out, and maybe check out FetLife.com, which is a great BDSM resource.
Okay, and Frank, any last words that you want to add?
I think most people have some element of fetish in them. Maybe they have fantasies that they don't feel safe sharing, and ignorance has never been a form of protection. So, if you do have these fantasies, if you do have these thoughts, it's okay, and if you want to explore them, do it safely.
Right. They don't involve, as in Carla Homolka and Bernardo's case, any killing.
No.
We're not talking about murders either here. Thank you both for joining us on Passion. Appreciate it very much. Annabelle, thank you so much for your time.
Listen to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito, live weeknights 10 to 11 on CJAD and CJAD.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com.
franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching available in person, by phone, and by Skype. For singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles, franktalks.com.
franktalks.com. franktalks.com. franktalks.com. franktalks. franktalks.com. franktalks.com. franktalks.com.